Hello and welcome to Ecocentric. I'm your host, Jake Zaleski. We've got a lot of environmental news to cover this week, so let's get started. So first off, the studio is currently being set up. If you can't tell, I just moved into a new house, so it's a little awkward right now. However, there should be a set studio or something by the end of the month, and with each video, you'll see more and more of it being built, set up, whatever. Anyway, that's not why I clicked on the video. Let's get started. Oh, also, this is a new camera. Before we were using 720p, but this is 1080i. Here's a side-by-side comparison. What do you think? Should we stick with the new camera or go back to the old one? Okay, on to the news for real. First up, Democratic candidate Jay Inslee has announced an ambitious plan for a carbon-neutral United States. Dubbed the 100-100-100 plan, Inslee's three-part approach dictates that 100% of cars sold will be electric, the U.S. power grid will be 100% carbon neutral, and 100% of new buildings will produce no greenhouse emissions by 2030. The Washington governor is launching a similar policy in his home state. 100-100-100 represents a culmination of Inslee-backed climate measures over the years. Despite the daunting scale of this plan and the ticking clock that comes with it, Inslee has managed to pass it in his own state by personally reassuring each sector that it will be affected. He plans on using similar tactics and monetary incentives to entice the public and business alike into cooperation. 100-100-100 has already resonated well with Green New Deal supporters, and as expected, it has drawn a significant degree of skepticism and criticism from moderates and the right, respectively. Now we have some news from our friends over at 0 Hour. Environmental activist group 0 Hour has announced the creation of a youth climate summit, which is to take place in July. The purpose is to train youth to become activists in their own communities. The event taking place in July is significant due to the fact that it marks a year after the youth climate strike. The location is also significant because Miami is a frontline community being incredibly impacted by climate change. More information can be found at thisis0hour.org/Miami. I gotta change this shirt. It's producing too much noise. The next bit of news isn't surprising, but it still is a little oppressing. Droughts throughout the entire 20th century have been linked to man-made climate change. Scientists of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and elsewhere have found a close correlation between average precipitation and soil moisture and atmospheric carbon levels over the past century. Spikes in droughts across the globe immediately followed spikes in greenhouse gas emissions during periods like the Second Industrial Revolution in 1981 to the present. Aerosols were found to be another likely culprit for changes in precipitation, so the degree of causation attributable to greenhouse gases alone is still being researched. Regardless, researchers can conclude without doubt that the human impact on the global climate is far from a recent development. Some good news came out of the Extinction Rebellion protests we covered last week. In a show of unprecedented support for environmental action, the UK has declared a climate emergency. The Committee on Climate Change has stressed the necessity of achieving net zero carbon neutrality by 2050. The seemingly lofty goal becomes encouragingly feasible upon examination of what it will take to achieve the net zero and what Britain is already doing to further its environmental goals. Progressive policies by SNP in Scotland, Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, and Plaid Cymru, I hope I'm saying that right, in Wales, have already put the UK on a path to a similar carbon footprint. Their combined force, alongside Labour, the Liberal Democrats, and some Conservatives, amounts to an effective control in Parliament, greatly increasing the likelihood that environmental reforms will pass. Aside from its political feasibility, carbon neutrality will not represent a drastic step for a small nation with a sharp downward trend in carbon emissions since 2000. Britain will still face myriad obstacles before it becomes the first carbon neutral G7 nation, but there is undeniably positive outlook for the country's new climate commitment. Now for a pretty depressing report, but nothing surprising. If we continue polluting and releasing greenhouse gases at the rate at which we are releasing them, up to 1 million species could go extinct, according to a new report. The report also cites land use as a major cause, amongst many other things. We'll actually include a link in the description so you can read it yourself. The report, which was compiled by 145 experts in 50 countries and based on 15,000 sources, states that nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history, and the rate of species extinction is accelerating, with grave impacts on people around the world now likely, and that the overwhelming evidence presents an ominous picture. It continues to state that changes must be made now, and it must be transformative. How do we get to this point? How do we get to the point where 1 million species could go extinct due to our actions? There are about 8.7 million estimated species on Earth, with only 1.3 million cataloged. Keep this in mind. This isn't 1 million animals going extinct. This is 1 million species. Imagine if I told you that 1,000,000 different cities on Earth will be eradicated by the climate crisis. Except that isn't even indicative of how bad things are, since there are only around 4,500 cities on Earth with more than 150,000 people. Do you want some more reasons to join Fridays for Future? Here they are, from the report. 3/4 of land-based environments and 2/3 of marine-based environments have been significantly altered by humans. The amount of non-renewable resources being extracted has doubled since 1980. Up to 300 million people are at risk for floods and hurricanes now. Plastic pollution has increased tenfold since 1980. We need to elect leaders who are actually going to take care of this world. If a politician doesn't prioritize the environment for all I care, they don't deserve a single penny of our tax dollars. Systemic and fundamental change on a worldwide level must happen now. This ecocide is sickening. I hate to follow up a story about loss of biodiversity with the United States refusing to enact environmental protections, but here we are. The United States is blocking an Arctic Council resolution to preserve the polar ice caps and their surrounding ecosystems. The United States stands on the world stage as one of the few remaining bastions of climate change denial, with an influence on the United Nations environmental measures greatly disproportionate to its contributions therein. America often finds itself holding back global climate action. The Arctic Council became the latest victim of this obstruction on Tuesday when, under intense U.S. pressure, it failed to jointly issue a new report for the first time since its establishment more than 2 decades ago. U.S. diplomats negotiating with the organizations of Arctic leaders omitted any mention of the serious environmental issues facing the Arctic. They insisted upon leaving climate change out of the talks because U.S. leadership has made it clear its stance that human-made climate change is neither proven nor a pressing matter. The resolution to protect the Arctic Circle and its nations from environmental destruction was therefore effectively blocked by the United States. However, negotiations can and likely will continue without U.S. involvement, but any resulting agreement will have limited legitimacy and efficacy without U.S. backing. Events as the Arctic Council serve as a sobering reminder that one of the most capable and powerful nations in the world represents one of the greatest obstacles for meaningful climate action. Let's end today with a really great story. Ireland has become the second country to declare a climate emergency, as well as a biodiversity emergency. The country currently has a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. The country has made headlines before regarding climate change, including their promise to pull all investments from fossil fuels. The world now waits to see what Ireland does in the face of this emergency. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at WeAreEcocentric. Well, that's all for me. That's your insurance day of the world. See you next week. We need to elect leaders who are actually going to take care of this world. You gotta get down, buddy.